District followed by Ehlanzeni. We've also noted that most of these crashes, they have occurred on Monday.
South Africa's National Police Commissioner General Thami Ngubeni says the suspect responsible for the murder of popular DJ and media personality Warwick DJ Waras Stock will be arrested this weekend. DJ Waras was gunned down on Tuesday in the Johannesburg CBD outside a hijacked building he had been providing security services. Ngubeni was speaking during an oversight visit to the ongoing safe festive season operations in Pretoria this afternoon. Ngubeni says he is confident that an arrest is imminent.
A suspect has been identified and he will be arrested. I'm sure before Monday we will have the suspect arrested. He's a known suspect. He will definitely, if not today, but over the weekend, that suspect will be arrested.
Over 1,000 civilians have been killed when it's blocked entry of food and supplies to the Zamzam camp in Sudan's western region of Darfur, housing nearly 500,000 people displaced by civil war. During the takeover, the RSF directed attacks against civilians, and survivors reported widespread killings, rape, torture and abductions, with at least 319 people executed in the camp or as they try to flee. The RSF has previously denied harming civilians and said that it will hold its forces to account for any violations. Food security experts backed by the UN say 100,000 people in Gaza were still experiencing famine last month despite the ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. They report some improvements in food supplies reaching the territory, but warn that 500,000 people there are facing emergency conditions. The BBC's Yolandi Nell has more.
Since the fragile ceasefire came into force in October, the UN and other humanitarian agencies have been able to increase food getting into Gaza, as have merchants. The IPC analysis shows that a month ago, 500,000 Gazans were still facing emergency conditions and more than 100,000 were experiencing famine. It projects that number will continue to decrease, but stresses the situation remains highly fragile. Israel rejected the original findings of famine by the IPC, which monitors and classifies global hunger crises.
Recapping the top story this hour, South Africa's Border Management Authority, or BMA, says it hopes that the use of technological advanced devices will help curb illegal immigration at the Maseru Bridge port of entry during this festive season. For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo Ngwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in the sports news, the Sawa CAF announces record European broadcast partnership for the Africa Cup of Nations tournament, while New Zealand cricket a chief executive officer resigns from his job. I'll tell you more at the bottom of the hour.
Business, trade, and investment opportunities that put the continent first. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni.
It has gone exactly 6 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. A very good afternoon to you, Africa. This is the final edition of Africa in Business for this 2025 year. And guess what? Oh, is it going to be a bumper one? We've got Victor Humuswana with us in the studio today as we take a look back at some of the leading business stories on the African continent. A lot on our agenda there. That is our business roundup coming up in just a moment. We'll also take a look at the price of meat with the December holidays now upon us. The braai season full in force. If you're wondering what a braai is, well, it's a barbecue, it's a grill, and it really is just one of those pastimes, and that's what we'll call it in South Africa. So we'll be joined this afternoon by senior agricultural economist at FNB, Paul Makube, as we look at the price of meat, and also a roundup of the oil situation in West Africa, where crude oil producers are finding it increasingly difficult to place December and January loading cargoes. This as the global supply floods the market and cheaper alternatives intensify competition. That and a whole lot more coming up today on Africa in Business.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
We start here this afternoon with a look at tourism, which is on an upward trajectory in South Africa. This is according to South African Tourism. The organisation revealed that between January and October of 2025, the country welcomed about 8.5 million visitors, which is an increase of about more than 1 million as compared to the same period last year. The organisation says what is more exciting is that more than 70% of those visitors came from the rest of the African continent. Sisi Sekhalo has more on the story.
South African Tourism says travellers that are coming from outside the country love Gauteng and also Cape Town. The acting chief marketing officer at South African Tourism, Thandiwe Matibela, says not forgetting the Kruger National Park, which people visit for experiences. The Kruger is quite popular for safaris. Matibela says, however, they're seeing a number of people wanting to explore the country and visiting places such as Mpumalanga and Kabeja in the Eastern Cape province. Matibela says the hospitality of the country is what attracts people to it.
People wanting to come to South Africa, they will be pleasantly struck by how warm South Africans are, how welcoming South Africans are, how kind South Africans are. And I think that's the one thing that we've also, found from our research, that when people have visited South Africa, they literally cite South Africa's warmth, and also the wide variety of things to do. We've got the best of food, the best of arts and culture, heritage, history. We've got the best of experiences. So people must come open, to exploring and really creating memorable experiences for themselves. People must come ready to receive the joy because, our global brand campaign invites them to come find their joy. So absolutely in South Africa, they will find joy in all the wide variety of things that we've got to offer as a country.
With the holiday season having begun, more and more people are going to tourist destinations. South African Tourism has tips for the visitors and locals, as Matibela elaborates.
My advice or tips that I would give to the travelers is that obviously be aware of your surroundings, but absolutely take in the joy that comes with this country. Like I said, there is a lot to be enjoyed. For domestic travelers, we always say enjoy. It's your country. After all, it is your country. Take a short left. After all, it is your country. Enjoy it. That's what we say from a domestic, because we do absolutely believe that there is lots to be joy to be found in this destination. For international travelers, we say come with an open mind. Come explore, come experience something unique, different. And honestly, you will be absolutely blown away by the memorable experiences and that you will be able to enjoy here in South Africa.
One of the areas frequently visited in South Africa is the city of Cape Town, which in it reside the historic Robben Island and Table Mountain. Table Mountain Aerial Cableway Company, located in the mountain, is quite popular amongst visitors. The company welcomed their 33rd millionth visitor this December. Managing Director of Table Mountain Aerial Cableway Company, Wahida Parker, elaborates on why people love their activity.
I think people are attracted to the fact that this mountain sits in the middle of a city. And the views from the top of the mountain are absolutely incredible. As you know, it's such an integral part of our history. And I think people love the mountain because it has so much to offer. It has got so many beautiful trails for hikers. It's got an abundance of flora and fauna, which for the enthusiasts makes it an absolutely wonderful place to be. And of course, the fynbos, which is recognized for its status from all around the world.
For Channel Africa, I'm Sisi Sekhalo in Johannesburg, South Africa.
It is exactly 12 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. This is, without a doubt, one of the highlights of my week as we end the week. And not only the week this time, but we also end the year with Victor Khumuzwana, author of Africa is Open for Business and Africa Bounces Back. He's also the Executive Director for Marketing and Communication at the University of Limpopo. A very good afternoon to you, Victor. So good to have you join us in the studio.
Good afternoon, Thami. It's always great to come to the SABC. Big country. It's a big country.
It certainly
I
is.
must tell you, whenever I walk around here, man, this place is big.
It's humongous, and it's such an institution in and of itself as a building. You know, the amount of history that it houses is just incredible. But let's get back into business. One of the main stories this year was around the ZiG and Zimbabwe. So it's the story of gold and the BRICS' interest in the metal as a way to undo the dollar dominance. So this being one of the major themes this year.
Right, and that's why I picked this story. You know, it has been continuing. The theme of Zimbabwe has been going on, I don't know how long, at least since 1990, when the land reform started and the farms were dispossessed, or people were dispossessed of their farms, and we had inflation at one point, hyperinflation running into thousands. As we speak, they are expecting it to drop below 15%. It was at 80% when the year started. And one of the biggest, if you remember, inflation is about the power of the currency and whether it retains value over time. And because of the currency now that's backed by gold, it's a whole lot easier. I don't know if you saw not Bloomberg, I think it's JP Morgan, predicts that the dollar might hit the $4,000, I mean, the gold might hit $4,000 per ounce mark next year. Just think about it. It might get to $4,000. That's the projection because of the geopolitical tensions, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's the Middle East, whether it's... So whenever that happens in the history of financial markets, the gold tends to be the go-to place. So with that, and Zimbabwe having abundance of gold, it managed, and that's why, if you recall, whenever I raised this issue, I said, this could be one thing we must watch. Because although people can ridicule Zimbabwe and say, what do they know? The minute you back your currency with the resources you have in abundance, which is what we have been saying about Africa, right? That it's rich. Why does it need to go to the World Bank and borrow money when it can rely on the resources it has? And the power of the ZiG, which is the gold-backed currency, is an indication. And it has stabilized around the 26 to the $1 mark, which is not bad if you think about the South African rand being around 18, 19 to the dollar. So it's a stable currency, especially, as I say, because the inflation has come under control. But it's not a Zimbabwean story. It's a Malian story, it's a Niger story, it's a Burkina Faso story, it's a BRICS story. The BRICS countries have decided we are abandoning the dollar now, and one thing they're going to be doing, most of the BRIC countries, is to start stockpiling on gold, and that's why JP Morgan is talking about gold going up. Now, why is this relevant to Africa? Because there are not many African countries that don't have gold in the ground, and therefore it means that will be good for mining. But if we are smart about it and we start doing the beneficiation, then we will really reap the rewards of the resource boon.
It sounds like we're going back in time here.
Exactly.
Back to the gold standard.
Thami, you were around when velvet was in fashion. It went out, it came back. I don't know what happened to it now. Everything goes the full circle. It's exactly that. But just don't forget, gold was the standard.
That's why the phrase the gold standard.
I don't know if you remember, but when we were in the 70s and 80s, parts of the 80s, a banknote would have a message on it: I promise to pay the bearer on demand in Pretoria. And if it was R2, it would have, I promise to pay the bearer of this note on demand in Pretoria, R2. We never quite thought about what that meant. It meant for every banknote you had, there would be a corresponding amount of gold in reserve for the day you might want to cash out your currency. America convinced us to move off the gold standard because they wanted to hype up the dollar and make it the preferred reserve currency. And they achieved that. But what happens when you get a president like Donald Trump, who you can never be sure what he's going to do? You then realize the volatility of your financial markets. And that's why I found this to be a big story, at least one of the big stories of 2025.
So it's really going back to basics.
It's
really going back to quote unquote nature
that.
and having your currency backed.
Like that. And God gives us all something.
That's right.
It's just that Africans had overlooked that they were given abundant resources, and they allowed the Bank of England to accumulate more reserves than itself.
Maybe when you've got something in surplus and you're used to it, you take it for granted because you don't really know its value. But those who knew its value certainly took advantage of
Exactly.
that. And so here we are once again. So that's a really interesting development to look out for in the next year or two, the gold standard, and also how BRICS is then also going to react to that. And with the further marginalization of the United States. And the DRC Rwanda deal that facilitated by Trump.
By Trump.
What's in it for him? What's
Exactly.
in it for Washington?
I want to read the actual agreement because, when we give opinions, people think we're making things up, right? So let me just see. I actually looked for the agreement. I love how it's worded, but I won't read the whole thing because, as you know, agreements are written in legalistic terms. But in the very opening statement, it says, acknowledging the long-standing partnership between the United States and the DRC and the mutual commitment to fostering peace and stability in the long term. Then I go down and just say the objectives of the agreement. I want to read it verbatim. I want to establish strategic partnerships between the U.S. and the DRC, reflecting the DRC's pivotal role in Africa and the parties' shared ambition to transform their cooperation into a long-term strategic partnerships. But the second point of the objective is that to strengthen opportunities for cooperation in security, defense, and protection of critical infrastructure to safeguard the integrity of the DRC. Now, when you hear defense, Thami, remember this. When you hear defense, you hear security, think America, because they have weapons by the tons. And whenever there's a threat of war, it doesn't have to be a real war. The minute you say there's a threat of conflict in this part of the world, what is a reasonable government going to do? It's going to stock up on weapons, right? Americans always benefit whenever there's talk of war. Every time. Either they go to war and they benefit from selling the weapons, or there's a threat of war and they benefit from selling weapons or even selling their own expertise. If you listen, there are many countries that are saying America must come and set up a security base to protect assets, and that's exactly what this is in it for. There are companies, the Bill Gates of this world, the Americans, I think even Jeff Bezos. I'm not quite sure. I might check that. But there are many countries that are U.S. that are interested in this, and the question is why. Among other things, top of mind is Apple is an American company. It needs the coltan, it needs all the minerals that are in the DRC. So when they talk about security for the DRC, they mean also security for American assets.
We were talking about this yesterday, how South African companies have actually increased their export of minerals to Israel. And that's because Colombia stepped back, saying that their minerals were being used for the production of arms, etc. And so they didn't want to have anything to do with that war. And so we continue to see Africa once again being the focal point, because we've got the raw materials that are being used in the manufacturing of weapons.
And that's the point that I'm saying, that whenever you hear about peace deal, whether to enforce it or to stop the war or to sometimes escalate the war so that one side can surrender, ask where the weapons are coming from. There are very few countries. America is one of them. It's a big player. The UK is one. So Germany, but the US and the UK, these are the two countries. Whenever there's talk of conflict, you must check their stock markets. Something moves because they do have that capacity. But as I say, even the Pentagon itself, whether you're going to need the American forces, armed forces, to come in and enforce, they're not going to do it for free. Somebody's going to have to pay for them. It might not be you, the DRC, but it might be the United Nations because they are rendering a service. It might be. So I'm always just interested on the financial side of things. The politics is fine. We can do the poetry and everything, rhythm and rhyme. But to me is who is benefiting financially. And the U.S. in this deal was benefiting. That's why it was signed in the U.S.
And ultimately, who benefits underpins a lot of the political decisions that are actually made.
Exactly.
And so the politics actually follows the money.
Although I must say, if you just think of what's happening in the Eastern DRC, we also mustn't be losing our humanity here. That is a humanitarian disaster. You don't want children running from a conflict zone, crossing borders, or being forced to live in very desperate conditions. So whatever peace deal we have there, it's something to commend, something to appreciate. And I'm just sick and tired of African neighboring countries fighting one another over conflict, because that's another terrain that is so confusing and deliberately being distorted, or the facts being distorted, to sow even more division and conflict among fellow Africans.
Another big story, Victor, G20. It was quite momentous for us as Africa. Yes, we were there.
You were there, Thami. I was just stuck in traffic.
Experienced it firsthand.
I was stuck in traffic. At least you were there broadcasting. And that's another thing. People say, who cares about the G20? It doesn't even have formal structures to enforce its own decisions. Hey, social media doesn't have many formal structures about how we engage, but we are there anyway. We spend a lot of time. And to me, G20 looks like a social media platform. And it's important. It is. Think about it. No, really. Okay, when you're done laughing,
I have to hold myself here.
But it's funny.
I'm interested to hear the reasoning. I'm interested to hear your reasoning.
So these are countries that command 80% of the world GDP and more than 50% of the world population, right? They include the US, they include South Africa, they include Turkey, they include this. So it's almost like countries that know that we have a lot to lose from the future not working out. So let's agree. Don't forget the history of the G20. When the crisis of 1998 rattled the world economy, followed by the credit crunch of 2008. So that decade, 1998 to 2008, America was in a shambles of sorts. The global credit crunch had destroyed the world economy. And these countries came together and said, guys, we have to foster a lot more cooperation in the way we run our affairs. Because remember, it was that Scandinavian countries where the housing crisis just led to the run on American banks and eventually collapsed the whole system. So it was almost like, let's be working together, because now we acknowledge that the world economies are more connected. That what happens in one country may have ripple effects or domino effects in another. And depending on which country is that, it could be the whole world. It was a Norwegian country, Norway or Denmark, or now I can't even remember, but it was a Scandinavian country. A simple housing crisis, but there were many American banks that were invested in. When it went wrong, the American financial crisis went wrong, and when the financial crisis in America goes wrong, the whole world catches flu, right? And that's where the credit crunch happened. And I recall, I remember I was self-employed at the time. I was forced to go back into employment because it was not sustainable to be outside. People lost houses, people committed suicide. So the G20 strengthened itself even more and said, we must find a way of getting the countries of the world to cooperate more.
And on that very note, Victor, when we see politics creeping into what was originally an economic solution, what are we to make of that? And I'm talking about Trump now.
When you see ignorance creeping in, that's what we are dealing with. It's not politics. He doesn't know the history of his own country. The man does not know the history of his own country, because if he did, he would not try to remove South Africa from the G20, which it co-founded. He would not try to say, he doesn't even understand this triumvirate, that you need 3 countries to run because we are collaborating here. So you have immediate past president, you have a current president and the incoming president, because the idea is like a relay race.
Right.
Now, somebody who doesn't understand why the G20 was founded will say things like President Trump is. But hey, this man took money out of the World Health Organization, a US-founded organization. The US was instrumental in founding the United Nations. He doesn't know that history. He sees it as a parasitic organization that's taking more money out of the US. Well, he doesn't know. To whom much is given, much is expected. The US made a lot of profit from World War II, and subsequent to that, built itself as a superpower. Now, he doesn't understand. After you've made all the money, you should then create a system. So he misses that. I would not say politics. I would say ignorance creeping in. Unfortunately, it's ignorance of the most powerful statesman in the world. We have to pay the price for it. I hope Americans will give us a better president.
Let's take a look now at the resource nationalization in Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso.
Yeah, those 3 countries, as you know, broke away from even the Economic Community of West African States and said we are going to form an alliance of Sahel states, right? And these are French-speaking countries, all 3 of them. and the diminishing, shall I say, power or influence of France, or at least the dominance, because France is still very much a diplomatic player on the continent. President Macron's very diplomatic. I really think he understood that he couldn't continue to play the same old politics of Charles de Gaulle and whoever came before him. But the removal of the French influence has opened so much room for the entry of Russia. If you look at Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, all of them are taking a lot more percentage, what we call free carry. The Western Resources, an Australian company, there were even Barrick gold, the 3 metric tons of gold that had been seized in Mali, which a court ordered sometime this month that it should be returned. But that means we are able to get more resource nationalism, which means allowing people whose countries have resources to benefit more. Now, Burkina Faso said we used to get, I can't remember, 10% free carry. They moved it to 15%. They wanted to move it to 35%. But then the companies started being forced to negotiate and say, no, instead of taking 35%, let's allow you to take more control of the other mines that we are researching. And when they reopen, they bring in Rosatom, they bring in other Russian companies. Again, the influence of France has now been diluted by the BRICS countries. And that is what we need, multilateralism. We can't have one country dominating. But what I like the most is how assertive African countries are becoming.
Let's take a look at our final 2 stories. If we can just wrap it up quickly. Strive, Masiyiwa's AI factory in Africa.
Right.
And then also let's take a look at aviation, focusing on some of the major players like Ethiopia and Egypt Air.
Right. I would rather we talk, okay, Strive, the AI factory. He's saying it's not enough to just be using AI and you don't have the capacity to, because remember, AI requires you to accumulate lots of data. Because the predictive, the P in ChatGPT means predictive, pre-trained, I think. So you must train the internet to give you answers. The only way you're going to train it to give you the answers is to put the answers there in the first place. That calls for a lot of capacity.
Right.
Strive is saying, let's work with NVIDIA to build those factories so that African countries can really control the AI business. Zimbabwe's richest man is a very commendable thing for his company. Aviation, I'm just liking how in the past 6 months, Egypt Air, Ethiopian Airlines, and I think even Kenya Airways have been ordering either Airbus 380s to just show that aviation is returning the rate of travel to where it was before COVID.
All right. We'll have to leave it at that for today, but it's been absolutely amazing. Thank you for coming through. And how would you rate this year for business on the African continent?
It's further stabilization and consolidation and building of alliances and networks, reimagining partnerships and networks. The story of Niger and what France not playing a dominant role but having to share that with that. Companies like Boeing no longer dominating the aviation because Airbus is also selling. Companies like Kenya Airways returning to profitability. Dangote opening the big refinery and now wanting to list it, so that Africans can really share in the bonanza that he put together. So I would say it's consolidation, but it's realignment, it's forming of new partnerships, and that's what we need in business. We need more multilateralism, just like we do in politics. But I really can't wait for the day Donald Trump will leave the stage, because he is destabilizing that which we need, which is collaboration among countries of the world.
There's another way that you could look at this, though, in the sense, yes, is causing instability. But is this the kind of instability that Africa needed? Is this the kind of wake-up shock that the continent actually needed in order to change our strategy? Because we've been going in this one track. And in a complacent environment, there is no pressure to change. And now we have no choice but to. So he is risk. The necessary evil.
Definitely. Always, if you can look at that, you see, you are a woman of faith, so you see these things when we heathens don't. No, but I agree with you. You need somebody to bully you a bit, because when they bully you, you realize how resistant, how resilient you are, and you are forced, like you say, to say, hey, Do I have to be dependent on a country with 300 million people when I could sell to China, to India, and to Africa with 1.4 billion people? Then you say, actually, it was a blessing in disguise that the bully came up.
And maybe we need to be having these same type of conversations with the likes of, IMF, with the World Bank, etc., where we don't have taps of money flowing through. What then would we be able to do as a continent if those restrictions were there? But Victor Khomosana, I look forward to us chatting again in the new year. Thank you so much. Have a great one.
Have a good festive season. Be safe.
We shall. Certainly. It's exactly 4:33 Central Time. Let's take you now to the markets desk where Thabiso Lehoko is standing by with your latest market indicators.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Thami, and good afternoon. $1 in South Africa is trading at 16 Rand 75. In Botswana, it's at 13.6 Namibia, 16 Namibian dollars 75. And in Zambia, it's at 22 kwacha 78 to the dollar. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shillings 61. Ethiopia, 155 birr 74. Uganda, a 3,000 shilling 546. And in Tanzania, it is trading at 2,000 shilling 476. In Nigeria, the dollar is trading at 1,454 naira. In Egypt, it's at 47 Egyptian pound 53. Tunisia, 2 dinar 903. Algeria, 128 dinar 732. And the Moroccan dirham is at 955 to the dollar. In Angola, the dollar is trading at 912 kwanza, while the Congolese franc is at 2,245 to the US dollar. A look at commodities markets now. Gold, $4,327 and platinum, $1,911 per ounce, while Brent crude oil is at $60.06 a barrel. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business here in Johannesburg, I'm Thabiso Lehoko.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
And for the latest from the business of sport, here's Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you so much, Thami. A very good afternoon from the sports desk. We'll start with this story. So CAF earlier on this week announcing a landmark deal with Channel 4 in the United Kingdom, the first time that all 52 AFCON matches will be on free to air in the UK, with CAF having secured a new deal as well in Spain with Movistar Movistar. So the move to one of Spain's leading sports broadcasters with extensive reach, along with the country's strong Moroccan diaspora, as well as deep connections between CAF, AFCON, as well as Spanish football, is expected to drive substantial viewership. So in a major expansion, CAF also have reached a new agreement with free-to-air broadcaster ERT to bring the AFCON back to Greek screens, and also ensuring nationwide coverage for the very first time in many years. Additionally, the Total Energies Africa Cup of Nations tournament in Morocco will be shown for the very first time on free-to-air in Norway through a new deal with VGTV. The Africa Cup of Nations gets underway on the 21st of December, this coming Sunday, and will conclude on the 18th of January. Now, Commonwealth Sport today confirmed that Warner Brothers Discovery has secured the exclusive UK live broadcast and digital media rights in a landmark deal for the Glasgow 2026 Commonwealth Games. Now, TNT Sports will bring live coverage to viewers via a dedicated linear channel in the UK as well as Ireland. More than 600 hours of live coverage will be offered to fans, with every sport and event streaming on HBO Max in the UK following the platform's launch in March of 2026, with an ambition to maximize access for the widest possible audience. Onto the story now. New Zealand Cricket Chief Executive Officer Cross Winnick has resigned and did so earlier today, bringing an end to a turbulent tenure marked by a prolonged and increasingly bitter dispute over the future of T20 cricket in the country. Now, Winnick, a businessman as well as a former Wellington first-class cricketer, stepped down after just over 2 years in the role, with fundamental differences emerging between him, the players, as well as New Zealand 6-member associations. At the heart of the disagreement was the proposed franchise-based T20 competition, tentatively named NZ20, which is envisioned as a replacement for the existing domestic Super Bash. The proposed league would then seek foreign investment as well as ownership, potentially involving the Indian Premier League, which is known as the IPL franchises, and also aims to attract top overseas players to New Zealand. On to some cricket news now. Andrea Petkovic, former German WTA player, has reacted to the announcement made by the WTA as well as Mercedes-Benz, calling the 10-year partnership with Mercedes-Benz the most meaningful deal in the tour's history. Beginning officially on the 1st of January in 2026, the WTA Tour will officially become the WTA Tour driven by Mercedes-Benz, a landmark commitment expected to be worth up to $500 million. It's also understood to be worth $44.5 million per year for up to 10 years, with the potential to be the largest in women's sport. Let's hear from Andreva as she also, speaks about the importance of this deal for women's tennis in the world.
What excites me the most about the future of women's tennis is that I think we are still able to grow. Even though we can already see the impact that women's tennis has had. We still have 7 of the top 10 most earning female athletes are tennis players. The Grand Slams are fully sold out. The US Open semifinal day was the best tennis day of 2025. Even though you see all these steps already taken, there is still so much more growth to be had, and
Well, for any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It has gone exactly 20 minutes to 5 p.m. Central African time as we take a look at the price of meat, with the December holidays now strictly upon us and the rice season in full force. South African consumers will be feeling the strain of sharply higher meat prices at the tills. When we take a look at meat inflation, it has climbed to its highest level in almost 8 years. And this is driven largely by disruptions caused by foot and mouth disease as well as tighter supplies. To speak to us about what is behind these increases, what government's new disease control plan means for the sector, and when consumers might finally see some relief, we're joined on the line by senior agricultural economist at FNB, Paul Makobe. A very good afternoon to you, Paul. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me.
So when we look at meat inflation, it's now at an 8-year all-time high. In simple terms, what are the main forces driving prices to be so high right now?
Yes, unfortunately, we as a country, we faced biosecurity issues with the outbreak of foot and mouth disease, which was, more prevalent in cattle. And as a result, we had intermittent, supply interruptions and interruptions to trade. And as a result, it created uncertainty in the market, and that resulted in panic buying, and which saw prices, staging from mid-year this year.
So foot and mouth disease has also been identified as a key trigger for the surge in prices. How exactly does an outbreak translate into higher prices for consumers at the supermarket?
Yes, it translates due to the fact that the panic buying results in the higher prices, at producer level, and obviously that has to be passed on to the consumer. As a result, we see these elevated prices. But in terms of the availability of cattle, we've got normal availability. The only problem has been the interruption to trade, the interruption to the slaughtering patterns. And despite the fact that we have a ban, which means the meat that was supposed to go overseas is now in the local market, we didn't see that having an impact on prices in terms of downward pressure on prices. Instead, we have that increase in prices due to panic buying largely.
Now, when we look at beef prices, in comparison to, let's say, pork or poultry, those prices have risen far faster than other meats. What does this suggest? Does it suggest that perhaps there's a deeper supply problem in the cattle industry compared to pork or poultry?
Yeah, the supply problem, the supply crunch in the cattle industry or in the beef industry is mainly due to the fact that we had intermittent disruptions due to the outbreak of FMD. Means that certain slaughterhouses or feedlots had to close temporarily and not slaughter. And obviously that affected availability, and obviously, the buyers or up the value chain, the guys started panicking and then looking for more product at a higher price. In terms of the poultry and pork, they are high intensive production systems where they were not necessarily highly impacted by the disease. Obviously, it is not a chicken problem. It is more a cloven hoofed animal problem. And as a result, the price of beef had to accelerate more than the price of other meat types.
So when we look at the global food prices, they tend to be easing, but South Africa is not following that very same trend. South Africans are paying more for food. What is it that is stimulating this, and why are these local factors outweighing the global trends?
Obviously, I think we're talking here about meat, which is the trend that is different on the international market. But if you look at the general trend in food inflation, it actually has eased, and in fact, across the other categories such as your cereals, we see downward pressure. It is only that meat has kept food inflation relatively higher. In terms of the global situation, we see that prices across the board are coming down, meat coming down as well, slowing, and obviously the local fundamentals are the ones that are actually keeping the South Africans not to benefit from the decline on the international market.
When we look at the Agriculture Department, they say that South Africa now has a credible roadmap to become FMD free with vaccination. How important is this for restoring export markets as well as stabilizing the $4.7 billion livestock industry?
Obviously, I think we take leave from other international players that face the similar problem of foot and mouth disease, and in particular, we're talking Brazil, Argentina. Efforts at vaccination have yielded positive result over time, and they remain biggest exporters of beef into the world. So obviously, this positive news, but obviously it's going to take a bit of time. To get to fruition, as it's going to be phased in. It's going to be a phased in process to ensure that we have increased availability. But obviously, as things start stabilizing, we are likely to see that benefit get into the consumers.
So when we look at this plan, it does depend quite heavily on a number of factors like industry cooperation, mass vaccination, as well as traceability systems. When we look from an economic perspective, are the costs and the logistics realistic?
That was a very necessary action that has to be taken, because the industry was going to face ruin due to the uncontrollable foot and mouth disease. Industry players, the government, they have come together, and that influenced the decision to transition to national vaccination. That will ensure that at some stage we are able to control the situation, and that is commendable.
So if this vaccination drive is indeed successful in cutting FMD incidents, and let's say over a period of about 2 years, how quickly could this feed through into lower meat prices for consumers? How soon will consumers be able to start feeling the difference?
Yeah, as we said, it depends on how the vaccination program goes. If it goes according to plan, we are likely to see that benefit coming in sooner than expected. Remember, the only thing that caused the surge in prices is that you had the outbreaks that interrupted the supply chain. So when you have that stabilization, we have availability in terms of animals to supply the South African market. So once that stabilization comes in, we are likely to see a situation where that we see moderation in prices. Moreover, on the cost side, feed prices have declined significantly, which put producers on a positive note. And obviously, if the situation stabilizes, we are likely to see that moderation in prices in the medium to long term.
Paul Ngubeni, we thank you so much for your time and just taking time out to talk about this issue with us this afternoon. You have yourself a splendid day further. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's a senior agricultural economist at First National Bank, Paul Ngubeni. He takes us to exactly 4:49 Central African Time.
Ukatili wa kijinsia unaharibu maisha na kutenga jamii. Hutokea nyumbani, shuleni, kazini na mara nyingi kwa ukimya. Lakini hauwezi kuendelea. Ukiona, ongea. Ikiwa unaumia, funguka, kwa sababu kutofanya lolote sio chaguo. Sikiliza vituo vyote 19 vya redio kuanzia Jumatano ya tarehe 23 Julai kwenye mijadala, ushauri, tamthilia, maonyesho ya elimu na mahojiano na wataalamu, manusura, watunga sheria na nchi nzima iliyoathirika na ukatili wa kijinsia kwenye vituo vyako pendwa vya redio. Piga simu 0800 428 ili kuripoti unyanyasaji au kupata msaada. GBV ikomeshwe na wewe. Ujumbe huu umeletwa kwenu na shirika la SABC.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It is exactly 4:51 Central African Time, and you know what happens at this hour. We say bonjour to Joël.
Bonjour à toi Thami, bonjour à tous les auditeurs de Channel Africa. Vue d'Afrique, c'est dans quelques petites minutes et nous parlerons du coup d'envoi ce vendredi en Côte d'Ivoire de la campagne électorale en vue des législatives, mais aussi en Guinée de l'ouverture jeudi du procès en appel sur le massacre du 28 septembre 2009. Il y a des nouveaux développements. Et aussi nous parlerons de l'Afrique qui va vibrer au rythme de son plus grand rendez-vous sportif, c'est la CAN, et c'est très 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 bientôt. Merci de rester connecté sur Vue d'Afrique. Merci Thami.
Merci beaucoup. Restez connectés as Vue d'Afrique joins us in about 9 minutes time.
Conversations are happening, and Channel Africa is at the heart of them. We tell the African story with clarity, pride, and purpose, reaching audiences that matter to your brand. Partner with us and connect your business with listeners across borders in multiple languages and markets. For partnership opportunities, sponsorship, or sales, email us at partnership at channelafrica.co.za. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Keep Africa in your hands. Connect to our website for all your news, sports, and cultural updates. channelafrica.co.za.
Taking a look now at the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS is set to abolish air transport taxes. This is from January the 1st, 2026, in a move aimed at lowering the cost of air travel across the region. The bloc has also announced a 25% reduction in passenger and security-related aviation charges from next year. Channel Africa's economics reporter now examines the significance of this decision and what it could mean for airfares and regional connectivity.
The measures follows a decision taken by ECOWAS heads of state and government at their summit in Abuja in December 2024. Economist and managing director and CEO of Timeline Consult Limited in Nigeria, Shobi Idris, shares his perspective on the economic significance of ECOWAS' decision to abolish air transport taxes.
One needs to interrogate what are the concomitant features of a typical airline ticket. Number one, airline companies do try to price their ticket on a basis or on the basis of a number of factors. Chief among them is the cost of fuel. When and where ATK, otherwise known as aviation fuel, the international price increase, obviously airline operators will have to increase, their tickets because cost of operation would have increased. Secondly, the cost of buying an aircraft. Yes, an aircraft can be in service for 15, 20 years or even longer.
He says the move has the potential to encourage economic activities.
When and where the prices are relatively low, it encourages economic activities. It encourages boom. When and where prices are high, people can't afford it. Movement is restricted and activities could slow down. So obviously, if there is a reduction in taxation or an abolishment of a certain tax leading to a reduction in price of airline tickets, obviously that will signal, the fact that passengers could be enticed, to engage in trips.
But what impact could this reform have on regional trade, tourism, and business mobility in Western Africa, particularly for Nigeria as one of the region's largest aviation and economic hubs? Adeniyi Efatayo, CEO of Megastar Media Communications, shares his perspective.
The ECOWAS decision to abolish air transport taxes so that to reduce the cost of flight within that region is a good one, is a commendable one, and it will also, just like it will ease movement and it will increase more movement within the ECOWAS sub-region. And as well, like you said, that insinuating whether the airline will pass the cost saving to the passenger. So there has to be monitoring from ECOWAS, different country Ministry of Aviation. Then they need to monitor. They know how much the a 1 hour journey flight ticket cost. How much is it now after the implementation? It's not just about making the policy. They should make sure that all the policies are implemented they are followed up.
He also agrees that the move is expected to boost regional trade across the bloc.
We give more trade, more regional trade, and also in terms of tourism, people want to visit ECOWAS states. They want to see what they have for holiday, for vacation, for visit, and of course, business mobility. We can do more businesses because sometimes when you look at the cost that made up transportation is very key, and when you are talking about air transportation, sometimes it's most expensive.
For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Simos in Johannesburg.
It is exactly 3 minutes to 4 p.m. Central African time as we wrap up the top business stories and developments on the African continent for 2025. One thing that we did see is a strong investment and startup momentum, fundraising rebound on the continent, with startups raising $1.35 billion in the first half of 2025. Now, that's quite significant because it is a 78% increase from H1 2024. And it shows a revived investor confidence in tech as well as innovation. Those are the various sectors that really boosted up investment, and especially in countries like Nigeria, in Kenya, South Africa, as well as Egypt. Those are the countries that dominated the funding flows. Also, a number of private capital deals increased. Private investment on the continent hit around $3 billion in private capital transactions in the second quarter of 2025. Some corporate deals. We saw Diageo exiting East Africa. They sold 65% stake in the East African breweries to Japan's Asahi, and that went for a price tag of around $2.3 billion. Also, we saw beverage industry consolidation with Coca-Cola. They struck a $2.6 billion deal to acquire a 75% stake in Coca-Cola Beverages Africa. Those are just some of the key stories, and I certainly hope that you've had a prosperous and productive and profitable 2025. We're off now for this year for Africa in Business, and looking forward to joining you bright and early in the new year as we once again pick up our briefcases, pick up our laptops, and start trading. This has been the final edition of Africa in Business for 2025. From myself, Thami Ngubeni, and our entire team, you have yourself a splendid day ahead and a fabulous, restful, festive season. Over now to Vous d'Afrique.